Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for strategies to support economically disadvantaged students. My name is Brittany Boston, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. Also on the webinar today is Kirsten Bayer to help monitor questions and chat while I am moving through the presentation. So before we jump in, I do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. As I had mentioned, if you have questions or comments throughout the presentation, please feel free to put those in your chat or questions box. Kirsten is here to help me monitor those, and I will answer any and all questions and comments at the end. This webinar is also being recorded and will be made available within the next day or two on our ICSPS website under our Special Populations resources. And so with that, I will go ahead and jump into today's presentation. For those of you who have joined us for the presentations prior to, some of this is going to be some redundant information, but we always want to make sure that we kind of introduce ourselves and our center, and so you know kind of who we are and why we're presenting this information. So I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. We are housed within Illinois State University. And our focus really is on providing technical assistance and developing publications and resources and facilitating program improvement strategies for our partners and really focusing on that career and technical education, those professionals across Illinois. And when it comes to retention and recruitment and transition of special populations learners. So that's just a little bit about our center. And before I get too ahead of myself, I actually had to put this in here as a reminder to myself to let you guys know that the slides from today are in the handouts section on your little toolbar there, your GoToWebinar toolbar. So please feel free to download those. I will go through some resources and some upcoming professional development that is all linked on these slides. And so you'll be able to utilize it once you download the PDF. And then we also have our ICSPS FY21 professional development flyer. So on that flyer, you will see the rest of the special populations webinar series that are scheduled out through March, I believe. And then we also have a series on trauma coming up. That would be great for you guys to check out if you've seen some of the webinars that I have done in the past regarding special populations. I may sound like a broken record when I talk about trauma-informed care and how that can really impact our students and the relationships that we build with them and the way we interact with them. So we have that series coming up, and our Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project is also doing monthly webinars, and currently they are focusing on transition, so transition to employment, transition to post-secondary, and so all of that information, dates, times, links to registration are all on that flyer. So please be sure to download that and check any of that stuff out coming up. So what you are all here for today. I'm going to walk you just quickly kind of what our game plan is today. Again, if you've seen previous webinars, this has not changed. We will talk about how Perkins V and some of the other guidance and regulations define students or families that are economically disadvantaged. We'll look at some ways to inform and recruit our students into our CTE programs, possible supports and services that our students and families can benefit from. And then again, I really want to hear from you guys. I'm going to open it up for some discussion and questions because, as I always say, we learn more from the programs and from the people actually doing the work than I feel like you could ever possibly learn from me sitting here talking to you guys. You guys are the ones out there working with the students, working with the families. You are the boots to the ground. And so we definitely want to hear from y'all and how things are going and what you're doing to help support these students. And then I will share out some more additional resources on top of what I already shared with our upcoming professional development. So that will be our webinar for today, but let's go ahead and get into the content here. So who are economically disadvantaged students? So when you look in Perkins 5, Perkins 5 refers to this particular special population as individuals from economically disadvantaged families, including low-income youth and adults. What Perkins 5 does not do is specifically define what quote unquote economically disadvantaged or low income means. And so in my opinion, one of the nice things about Perkins 5 is that it really wraps and connects with WIOA and ESSA and some of the guidance and laws that we already have in place. And so when we're looking to really define what economically disadvantaged or what low income means, we are going to turn to WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act, and ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And so on this slide right now is not word for word the way that WIOA or ESSA defines this terminology. I kind of tried to summarize it a little bit there for you, and I combined the two of them together. So please don't think that this is specifically quoted from the laws. But when we're talking about economically disadvantaged, we're looking at those students or families that are receiving assistance through SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, through TANF, through Supplemental Security Income. We're also looking at a student who is a part of a family where the total family income does not exceed the poverty line, or 70% of the lower living standard income. So whichever of that is higher, they would then qualify as economically disadvantaged. And then within this, if a student is a student with a disability that meets those above income requirements, so the student, does not exceed the poverty line, 70% of the lower living standard income, but they are a member or part of a family who does not meet those income requirements, they still fall within this category of economically disadvantaged. And then we're also talking about students or families that are experiencing homelessness. They are currently receiving or are eligible to receive free or reduced priced lunch. And then they are being supported in a foster home through public funds. And so again, as I mentioned in previous webinars, when we are talking about special populations, and especially when we're talking about economically disadvantaged students, that is a huge umbrella. That's a huge overarching category that is going to hit multiple students. So as you can see, students who are experiencing homelessness, that is a special population in and of itself. Individuals involved in the foster care system, again, a special population in and of itself. And so when we're looking at strategies and support services for students that are economically disadvantaged, it really is based on that individual student and the family and the experiences that they are going through, because as you can see, homelessness, foster care, we're covering a wide range of different life experiences within this one special population. So, but this is what, per definition, low income, economically disadvantaged, this is the group that we are looking at. So what are some ways that we can inform and recruit these students into CTE programs? And again, you will see a lot of overlap here when it comes to this information, because like I said, when we're talking about economically disadvantaged students, we are talking about typically, again, I'm not going to overgeneralize here, but typically that covers a lot of, if not the majority of, special population learners, right? So when we want to inform and recruit, a lot of these are going to be similar to some of the strategies that I've shared in the past for other special populations. So partnership and collaboration is key. If you take nothing else away from this series or from today, I want that to be the one takeaway that you walk away with. Because when we're talking about CTE, when we're talking about career and technical education programs, it is a pathway, right? We want to make sure that our students are getting a chance to explore these different career options, that they are learning about the options that they have at an early age, that they are taking in this information and then being able to start within high school and move through the pathway. And the pathway we know has on-ramps and off-ramps, right? They can gain a certificate and then go into employment and get some experience under their belt and hop back on that pathway to build on those credentials and move up the ladder within their career. But we want to make sure that it continues to be a pathway. So partnering with our high schools, partnering with our community colleges, that could be, for CTE exploration days, that can be on the advisory committee for each of the CTE programs, making sure that we are staying in communication with one another to continue to move our students along that CTE pathway so that they're not just when they're moving through high school, we want to make sure that the work that they're doing in high school continues them on through, whether it's entering straight into the workforce, going on to a community college, going on to a four-year institution. We want to know that they are continuing on that pathway and not having to duplicate their efforts. And then making sure that we're encouraging academic and guidance counselors to promote the benefits of CTE programs. I think a lot of times we get caught up on making sure that we are informing students on our programs and that we are, selling our programs to them and letting them know what it is to be in a CTE program and the benefits. But I think we also need to look at staff as well, because as human beings, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so making sure that we are selling our programs and promoting our programs and cheerleading our programs to all of our educational staff that can then relay that information to students. And this can be done in multiple ways. I know right now a lot of us are all virtual. And so even if it's just, doing short little videos of an ag program in your area and having the instructors kind of discuss what it means to be in the ag program and what that looks like, and then doing a YouTube video on that and sharing that out with your staff either at the high school or the community college level, putting that on your Facebook page. Because if you don't have a Facebook page or a social media presence right now, I strongly encourage you to get one, because that's another way of informing not only our students, but their families, our own staff, of what these programs are and the benefits that they can provide to the people who go through them and complete them. So another key way to draw some students in is to inform students up front of support services that are available on campus. When we talk about special populations, especially once we get to the community college level, by definition of age, right, at 18, a student is considered an adult. And so if they fall within any of these special populations categories, it has to be self-disclosed. They have to give that information to you. And one of the ways to encourage that is to share those support services up front, to share that, if they need assistance with childcare or buying textbooks or uniforms or whatever the case may be, that there is a system in place to help them with that. But here's the population of students that qualify for those services. So being upfront about those additional support services in the very beginning. And then also emphasizing potential earnings and timelines when it comes to our CTE programs and completion of CTE programs. I think, I remember back to when I was in high school, and just in general in life, money talks, and we all think we have an idea of the career path that we want to take and the job that we want. But as we move through our lives, that changes. And knowing that there is a difference between a job and a career. You know, a job is what we get to kind of get some of that work experience, maybe get extra cash, you know, when we're younger, but a career is what we do to make that life-sustaining wage that a career we can grow into, we can move up in. And so really emphasizing those benefits of the CTE and those on and off ramps that students are able to utilize throughout their pathway, throughout the programs. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and jump into some supports and services. I apologize, I'm going to grab a drink there really quick. So like I had mentioned, when we're talking about economically disadvantaged students, it can cover a lot of the additional special populations that we have. So we have covered foster care involved youth in a previous webinar. We have covered individuals experiencing homelessness. Individuals with disabilities is coming up, but we do have those super strategy documents already laid out. We will be covering all of those as well. So be sure to utilize those because again, when we're talking about support services, when we're talking about additional ways to encourage student involvement and engagement and really to help them to be successful in these programs, it's all based on the individual. You know, we can come up with some overarching strategies and some general guidance, but it really is based on the individual. And so we want to make sure that we are looking at each individual student and their life experience and how that's impacting them now and possibly throughout their academic career. So be sure to look at those additional super strategies documents as well. And then taking steps to improve the accessibility of financial supports, whether this is financial aid, whether it's scholarships, whatever the case may be, reducing some of those hassle factors. So sometimes it may just be something as simple as having one point of contact. You know, we all know in our own lives how frustrating it can be when you email someone or call someone and you know that customer service experience, right? You call someone and they say, okay, well, let me put you on hold and I'm going to transfer you to such and such. And then that person transfers you to someone else. And the chain just keeps continuing. And you feel as though you're not really building a relationship. No one's actually hearing you because you've already talked to 5 extra people. So if we can reduce some of those hassle factors, that would be wonderful. Now, obviously, there are certain things that are set in place because that's policy, that's the way the institution works, absolutely. But always reviewing the enrollment process and putting ourselves in the shoes of our students and what that looks like to go through that process, I think is a great practice to put in place because a lot more can come out of that, and there may be some scenarios and some stops along the way that we're really kind of looking at like, okay, well, why do we need them to go here? Why can't they just go directly to point B? So looking at reducing some of those hassle factors and really simplifying the students and even the families' choice making. So taking some of, obviously we don't want to take all of the onus off of the student, especially when we're talking about community college. You know, they are an adult, they need to be involved in this process, but really helping them research and find what those options are for them and presenting them to them in a very simplified fashion, because we know that there are a lot of scholarships out there and it can be extremely overwhelming. And so just breaking it down, kind of those top choices for them, can be very helpful. And then providing clear messages and reminders to students and families about financial support services. So again, like I had mentioned, having that one point of contact, making sure that when we all know that in our little educational world and our bureaucracy world, we have our own lingo, we talk in acronyms, and we have, the terminology that we use amongst ourselves. but they may not be familiar with that terminology. And so just making sure that in our communication, we are being very clear. You know, and I was guilty of it just now. I was talking about WIOA and ESSA, and I don't even know if I actually described what those were, actually used the actual term of those. So making sure that we are just being very clear in our messaging to our students and our families. And as I had mentioned earlier, assisting them in researching available scholarships and FAFSA completion. I know I have talked to several high schools that actually have FAFSA nights. And I know that right now those probably looking very different because, you know, depending on the area you're in, some of us may be in person, some of us are not, but just providing assistance where we can and when we can. And then considering opt-out versus opt-in models to really normalize the use of those financial supports. And this could be more along the lines of the post-secondary system, but it being able to enroll in a program and already have that system set up in place, it sort of breaks down that stigma of having to ask. So instead of having students ask and say, okay, I need financial support with this or I need support with that, you can have more of an opt-out version where if they don't need it, if they don't qualify for it, then they can, you know, for lack of better terminology, remove themselves from that list. But having it be more of an opt-out option to normalize it can also be very beneficial. Connection also, I think, is one of the key things, you know, when we're talking about supporting our students and getting our students to engage. Building relationships is almost the foundation that everything else is built off of, right? And especially right now, I know it can be even more difficult than it was before because a lot of us are still virtual and we aren't getting that face-to-face contact and getting our eyes on students as we were able to in times past. But continuing to try to connect and reach out to these students is key, whether that is through, you know, offering counseling and advising services several times throughout the semester, again, to help foster a meaningful relationship and to let students know that there is somebody there for them and to open those lines of communication. And so these, you know, in our virtual times could be a Zoom call, they could be, you know, we have so many platforms right now that are available to us to continue to reach and connect with our students and just continuing to utilize those as best as we can. And then reviewing data. I think that we all know that data talks and that, you know, data is huge. That lets us know where our program's at, how our students are doing. And so reviewing that quantitative and qualitative data can help determine the numbers and the characteristics of economically disadvantaged students. And this can also help inform how those students are experiencing your programs and your institutions, and then which factors are affecting their ability to succeed. So you can see, you know, which students and the characteristics that make up those students are utilizing these additional supports and services, and are they benefiting from those supports and services? Can you see a difference from, you know, first semester when they were not utilizing support for childcare, for example, and then second semester they did? Is there a difference? Has, you know, did their attendance improve? Did their level gains improve? Any and all of that information, did that change at all once those supports and services were put in place? And you can also see if there's any gaps. Is there any additional services or supports that need to be utilized that could possibly change these outcomes and these data? And again, I'm going to talk about partnership because, like I said, partnership is also key, but looking at those not only internal but also external partnerships within your local areas with local agencies that you can build those relationships with, those partnerships with, to fill those gaps that we had just talked about, to help meet the additional needs of the students that maybe your institution or your district or your school is not able to fulfill. And keeping those lines of communication open so that you have, you can set up a referral process in place or know the additional services and supports that they provide that some of your students can benefit from. And then also having information readily available for supports and services throughout the community, and having these readily available to all students and families that are in your district, in your school, in your community college. Because again, as I had mentioned, at times there can be that stigma attached to asking for help or letting people know that you need that additional support. And so if you make it readily available, whether it's, an area on your website that is labeled supports and services, or hopefully something more ingenious than that, but it's a Tuesday afternoon and that's as thoughtful as I can get right now. But something on your website that has these additional agencies and community resources available to your students and their families. And even if it could be, once we're back to being in person, a hard copy binder in the office or in the classroom that people can easily utilize. And some of these services, obviously this is not an exhaustive list, and again, it's based on your local area and what you have available to you, but looking at food pantries, mental health agencies, public health departments, community action agencies, and so on and so forth. And then, as I had mentioned before, promoting these available services for economically disadvantaged students and their families to the entire student body. Because, again, it can be some stigma attached to asking for help, attached to needing that additional support. And you'll notice throughout this webinar that I have been referring to this particular special population as economically disadvantaged and not low income. And again, that is a personal choice that I made, but I think, at times when we have these certain phrases or terminologies that we use, there can be a stigma that is attached to that and some negative connotations. And when you say a certain phrase or a certain word, people automatically start, whether consciously or unconsciously, coming up with these characteristics and judgments already. And so just trying to break that down and step away from those bureaucratic terms and really look at, people first language, and trying to spin it to where, this isn't a negative thing. Everybody needs additional help. Everybody needs supports and can benefit from those services at some time in their life. And so really trying to avoid and break down that stigma that may be attached to asking for that additional help. Okay, and so now is the part that, everybody loves, that participant involvement, but I want to hear from you guys. I want to know not only now, currently, but before the pandemic and once we get back to some sense of normality, how are you supporting economically disadvantaged students? Or what are some thoughts that you, experiencing everything with the pandemic and going virtual and e-learning, what are some things that you would like to implement in the future? And then where do you see those gaps? Where do you see those gaps in services for your students? And do you have any steps that you are planning to take or wanting to take in the future to kind of help close that gap? So I will let you kind of think about that and put your responses in to the chat. And then at the same time, we will also go ahead and take any questions or comments that you have on the super strategies or today's webinar as well.
Okay, Brittany, so we did have a couple questions. The first one is, are you going to talk about either during this session or during another session how to help students with FAFSA that are homeless or aged out of foster care and do not have an address or have filed for taxes before? So is that something we're going to cover?
So we will not cover that in this webinar series. And I would highly encourage you, so especially when you're talking about students who experienced homelessness. And Stacy, I don't know if you're from the secondary or post-secondary system, but for those experiencing homelessness in the secondary system, typically there is a liaison within the district that that is sort of their expertise, and they can speak more to that. I can definitely do some more research on that on my end, but I will be very honest with you, that is not my expertise when it comes to financial supports and the legality of filling out the paperwork and all that goes into that.
Okay, thank you for answering that, Brittany. Aubrey says, Stacy said thank you. Aubrey says, we cannot easily identify this population. Not all students fill out the FAFSA or the DACA, and we do not track income level through our application. This has hindered any kind of comprehensive analysis because we cannot even create a population to study.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the key things that, and again, I am not an expert in this area by any means. For those of you who know Amy Julian, our director, she likes to throw that term out there when she says my name, but I will deny it forever. But one of the key things with special population learners, especially in the post-secondary system and even in the secondary system, is they have to self-identify, right? We know that this information has to be self-disclosed by the student or the family. And so that takes a little bit more creativity on our end. Whether I know I've heard of some programs that have done they've been voluntary, they've been optional, but they do provide questionnaires to students every so often that don't necessarily say, okay, are you experiencing homelessness? I mean, they're a little bit more eloquent in their terminology than that, but they provide these questionnaires to their students and promote the services and the additional supports that are available to those special populations as a way to encourage students to self-identify as one of the special populations. And so I wish that I had the golden ticket, right? I wish I had the magical answer of how to get our students to let us know this information up front, but of course we can lead a horse to water, but we can't make it drink. But just making sure that we are building those relationships, letting these students know, giving them a safe space and a safe connection to where they feel like they can share that information with us, promoting those additional supports and services that are available, and utilizing, if we do those questionnaires, because as we all know, a student status can change. It can change quickly. And so if we do, the questionnaires that I had mentioned, doing those multiple times throughout even a semester, because we know that status can change so quick, and just doing our best to garner that information as well as we can.
Great, thanks, Brittany. Vita says the FAFSA is now a graduation requirement, so that should help in the future with that issue.
Awesome.
And then Lucas says that they have been referring students to FA Department of Post-Secondary, which is a partner. Jamil at Lincoln Land Community College. First, they work with community partners to provide rapid referrals. Second, they receive information and sharing program and event information that provides resource assistance. And third, they work with internal campus divisions such as student success and financial aid to provide institutional assistance, which is,
Awesome, that's great.
yeah, amazing. Stacy has a question. She would like to know, is there a list of people first language questions that will prompt students to answer questions that will allow us to build data and be able to tell who we serve and how?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Stacy. So I don't know of a comprehensive list myself. I will say that if you look at any of the professional development that our center has put out, or the professional development that we have put out with our ATA, the Autism Training and Technical Assistance project, we try very hard to model that language. Um, and I know that there are a lot of um, community colleges that do that as well. And I don't know, Stacy, I see in the chat that you're post-secondary and adult education. And so I don't know if you guys have a listserv that you can utilize to reach out to some of your partners and community colleges within your area to see kind of, what that language looks like or what those questions are that they're asking specifically. But yeah, we try very hard in our professional development to model that language and that terminology as best as we can. But what specific questions that the community colleges are asking, I don't personally know that. But I do know that they are a very welcoming group. And so if you can reach out to anyone within your area, or even ICCB, they could probably be of more help as well in those specific questions.
Okay. Stacy said she will do more research. Thank you, which is great. And I did go ahead and put our ATA website, our Autism College and Career, for that Autism Training and Technical Assistance project. I put that website in the chat for everyone if you would like to reference that, or any of the monthly webinars, are good resources on there as well. There aren't any other questions coming through right now, Brittany.
Okay, so I will, while I'm continuing chatting, if you guys have any other comments or questions that come up, please feel free to go ahead and continue to put those in there. As I had mentioned, this webinar is a part of a webinar series that we are doing for special populations. So after winter break, we will start back up in January with English learners, and then later that month, we will look at students with disabilities and discuss some of the supports and services and strategies that we can use to help these students to be successful in our programs as well. And then some additional resources that I feel could be useful on top of the professional development flyer that I included in the handouts. The super strategy documents and the previous webinars that were recorded can all be accessed utilizing that link. So please feel free to check those out. That's where this webinar recording will be posted, along with the additional ones that we're doing throughout the fiscal year. And then earlier, a few months ago, I'm losing track of time, it's all one giant day, but a few months ago, we did a series on recruitment, engagement, and retention. And it was specifically for adult education, but I would highly, highly encourage everyone on the call to check it out. It looked at ways that you can utilize social media and all of those, the entities of Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all of the other ones that I'm too old to know about, utilizing those platforms to reach your students, engage your students, promote your programs, and it was presented on by community colleges themselves and how they are personally using it within their institution and their programs to connect with current and potential students. And so I would strongly, strongly encourage you to check it out because it was some amazing information and some great ideas of how to even, before the pandemic and before we moved to e-learning, we know that our students are on social media. That is how they communicate. That is how they engage with each other in the community. And so utilizing social media, whether we're in a pandemic or not, is something that I think all programs should be doing because it is a great way to get information out about your program, promote it, and reach potential students. And then also our Universal Design for Learning webinar series. We have done several series like this. We've done a series on our own. We've done one with CAST, who is sort of the leading force behind Universal Design for Learning. And for any of you who may not be familiar with UDL, the general concept is that we know that all students learn differently. Everyone has their own unique learning style, whether it's auditory, visual, hands-on learner. We all take in information differently. And so UDL looks at how we can adapt curriculum, our classroom, our teaching styles to accommodate all of those different learning styles. Obviously, it's much more nuanced than that. That's my novice explanation of it, but please feel free to check that out as well. And so with that, unless there are any more questions or comments, I do want to thank you for your time today. That is my email address. If you have any questions that come up later on about special populations or the super strategies or any of our upcoming professional development, please feel free to email me. And yeah, thank you guys for joining. Kirsten, I don't know if we had any more questions or comments come up.
Nope, none.
All righty. So with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful winter break and some time to decompress and de-stress. And we will start the rest of these special populations webinar series up again in January. So thank you so much for joining us.